Good evening and welcome to another Football Transfer Forum webinar. My name's Tony Sharkey. Tonight we're going to focus on negotiation as a topic. Negotiation is one of the key skills, I believe, in football business, and we're joined tonight by the guys from Total Negotiation Group. So, hi, Chris, how are you?
Hi, good evening, Tony. Very good, thank you.
Have you got any snow down where you are?
It's all melting actually, but it is bitter cold where we are at the moment. So yeah, definitely not one for walking outside too much.
Great stuff. And Mark, how are you, Mark? You okay?
No, I'm good. And yeah, a little bit of snow up here near Manchester, but no, generally all good and freezing cold.
So what we've been working on with the guys from Total Negotiation Group is setting up a course to look really deeply into negotiation. Tonight's just a little taster session. We've called this collaboration Total Football Negotiation. Obviously, the Dutch were famous for total football. So tonight we've got the Johan Cruyff and Marco van Basten of negotiation with us. So I'm really pleased about that. If you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris, before we crack.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone. And hello again to all the people that were with us last Thursday. So I've been working in sport for about 25 years on the commercial side of sport, and specifically around some of the big sports such as football, working a number of various different guises in that time, and negotiating sponsorship contracts and commercial contracts in football, and have been working with Total Negotiation Group for about 6 years now, I guess, looking at that sport and helping clients, rights owners, football clubs, people like that to negotiate better, training their people to negotiate better, and consulting with them to do better commercial deals. So that's my background and my understanding of sport and football generally.
Thanks, Chris. And how about you, Mark?
Yeah, Mark Grice. I set up Total Negotiation Group 11 years ago in 2009. Prior to that, mostly worked with big consumer goods companies. So I spent a lot of time at Diageo, Disney. I was UK sales and marketing director for Disney, dealing with a lot of retailers and big players across Europe. Worked for a managing director of a retail marketing agency. Set this business up. We thought there's different and better collaborative ways of negotiating. The business has grown really quickly in that time. We now have offices all over the world. And I mean, Chris will talk you through the kind of people we work with, but anything from the kind of NFLs to the Pepsis, Nestle's, Vodafones of the world. So yeah, and sport is something we've always done quite a bit of work in. We've been really fortunate to have Chris to work with us to lead the football side, the sports side of the business. And yeah, looking forward to this evening's session.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Now, just a few housekeeping rules. We've got the chat open tonight and we've shared our LinkedIn details in there. If you want to do that and share your details in the chat, that's more than we'll be happy for that. It's just a bit of soft networking. Make sure you click on, or don't send your LinkedIn details to all panelists. Click on the link and just go down a little bit and send it to panelists and attendees if you want to share it with everyone else. If you can do that, that would be great. We've got, and also the questions. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, and it's going to be 45 minutes long, so we've got plenty of time. If you've got a question, don't put it in the chat, put it in the question box, and we'll try and get to them either during it if it's irrelevant to what we're talking about at the time, or later on in the webinar. So if you can just pop stuff in the chat for now, your LinkedIn details. And what we're going to start with is we've got a poll. I'm going to launch the poll now, and it says, in your role, whether it's a football club, whether you're a sporting director, whether you're a football agent, whether you're a CEO, in your role in football, how often do you negotiate? And I'm not talking about maybe a transfer window, just in a general, just to get a feel for how much our audience tonight is involved in negotiation. So we've got the runners and riders there every day, once a week, once a month. Never. And for me, you know, I'm on here, I'm hoping to learn tonight. I know from my background that negotiation isn't one of my strongest suits. So I'm looking to learn tonight as well. We'll give it a couple more minutes for the poll. If you can just pop it in there. My money's on once a month here. It's looking favourite. So yeah, I'll end poll in about a minute. Just give yourselves another minute. If you haven't voted yet, just stick a vote in there. We've got a few more people to come. I don't think it's going to change much unless we get a last minute rush. Somebody's saying there, give us a smile, Mark. Huh?
Don't do smiling in negotiation. Serious.
And yes, yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to close the poll now. So just put your vote in, last couple of seconds just to vote. I think it's looking, it's a neck and neck between every day and once a month, I think. Right, I'll just end poll there. And I'll share results. Can you see that, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. Obviously, a lot of people are recognising how frequently they negotiate and doing it every day. I think we'll come on to the slide in a minute, the different types of negotiations that we think that are around in football that people may experience. So it'd be interesting to see if people change their view after seeing that list.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, generally when I talk to people within sport, just understanding actually when they think about it, quite how often they do negotiate, and it's always more often than they thought.
Yeah, I mean, in your role is a good question to ask, because you know I'm negotiating all the time in my business sense, but also at home as well. So there's a lot of negotiation going on. Can you just, we're going to talk a little bit about what sort of negotiations happen in football. And obviously we've got different people from both sides of the negotiating table tonight. So Chris, if you can just share that, what sort of negotiations we have, that would be good. Yeah, so just going through them, obviously transfer deals, they're the sort of sexy side of football. You know, we have Sky Sports getting excited about them. And obviously there's some big figures talked about, and all those figures have to be negotiated, whether it's a permanent transfer or a loan deal. And that's generally a sporting director or CEO talking to another sporting director or CEO in a club. I'm a registered football agent with the FA, agent to club. You know, we've put in that box first contract. I mean, that's an important one, Mark, isn't it? The first contract where you don't really know the other side and your players moving there. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, no, I think it's because you don't necessarily know that much, and it's around setting precedent. It's around setting that kind of understanding of how you're going to work. It's very much, it's really important because it sets out how you're going to do business with them going forward. So
yeah, and that point about going forward is a good one, because the next one is agent to club, and it's a renegotiation. So you're already there. You've had your player at the club for a while, and then you go back in to renegotiate another deal. The third one, Chris, I call this a compromise agreement. It's a termination agreement on this. What's your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, again, it's absolutely one of those things that need to be negotiated. Is, you know, whether you call it a compromise agreement, a settlement agreement, a termination agreement, is that absolutely the critical part, I guess, of that agent club relationship. And yeah, definitely one that will need negotiating, I've no doubt.
And then I'm sure this will chime with the sporting directors here, the negotiating within a football club. You know, you're talking to your owner, you're talking to your CEO, you're trying to get budget, you're trying to get some extra money for that star striker or whatever. And for the agents, you know, you might be in a big company and you might want a bit of a raise, or you might have to talk about a deal to a more senior person in that company. So there's all sorts of things that football people are negotiating on a regular basis. And obviously I mentioned the transfer window, and obviously that's just a real full-on time, you know, where you're probably negotiating every day and not once a month or whatever. But the last one, Chris, was everyday negotiations. So what was your thoughts on that one?
I think it's just very, very simply that there are far more negotiations that go on than we perhaps realise, and this one was specifically around those sort of conversational negotiations almost that take place on a very regular basis around all sorts of different things, from sort of access to players for promotional appearances, or whether players are allowed to, you know, kind of do sort of image right appearances and things like that. And you know, it sort of tends to get more involved in the sort of the commercial side of the club and the sponsorship and the partnership type people who are trying to negotiate whether we can use that image of the player or this image of the player, and can we get 4 players to do this piece of content for that sponsor, and all those kinds of things. All of that kind of stuff, you know, can be a negotiation as well, and sometimes needs to be treated as such.
So with that in mind, guys, and I think Mark's going to kick us off, just take us through your approach to negotiation and how you see, you know, how it goes for you guys.
So we're just going to talk very, very broad terms to kick it off, and then Chris is going to get into the detail. For us, the key words are on the right, but it's approachable expertise. So we believe expertise is really important, and that can be trained. Everything we do, and I think that our approach to negotiation is being very flexible. You've got to always look for the art of the possible. Saying no early is not going to help you. It's going to shut it down, and you don't know what somebody's going to offer or come back with later on. So think about being really flexible and keep your mind wide open. And it's being practical. There's no point putting up pie in the sky options. Think about how do you practically apply what you learn and also put it into the situation in a practical way. But it all leads to and Chris and I were talking about this morning, this collaborative approach to sustainable agreements is absolutely essential. There's no point having a massive fight, because massive fights generally end up with somebody feeling aggrieved. So if you can be collaborative, if you can think about putting yourself in the other person's shoes, and what are they trying to get out of this? They're not always trying to be awkward. It's just we interpret that because they've got slightly different interests than us. We think they might be being awkward, and I'm offering them this, but they want that. Let's think about where there is the overlap. By taking a collaborative mindset, it means we can end up with things being much more sustainable. If we both walk away from the negotiation shaking hands and we both feel good, that negotiation will probably A, stand us in good stead for a while. People won't want to unpick it. And B, when we come to do it again, it'll start off in a good note rather than having to rebuild a relationship because we had an absolute dust up and that agent or that sporting director or whoever has fallen out. I think that was, I mean, Chris and I spent about 20 minutes talking about this again this morning, didn't we? So do you want to pick it up from here, Chris?
Yeah, I think the key analogy that I always use in that, and you know, it is a bit of a football analogy as well, is that, you know, we go into a negotiation, we're not looking for a 5-0 win in this negotiation. We're actually looking for a 3-3 draw, because both sides need to come out of that negotiation feeling satisfied that they've got a deal that they can, you know, that they can go back and take back to their board or take back to their boss or present, you know, internally, and everybody's comfortable with it. So yeah, that's the analogy I tend to use. Okay, well, thanks for that, Mark. Mark just mentioned our sort of the growth of our business and how that's moved over time. And And I think what I talked a lot about last week was how a lot of the principles that we use in negotiation from a commercial perspective, and you can see some of our clients on the screen there, the principles of that are equally relevant in a sporting context, and whether you're selling phone contracts or bottles of Bacardi or bottles of tonic water, or actually more sporting deals. The principles of how you do that, the principles of how you prepare for that, the principles around how you execute those negotiations are pretty similar. There's always nuances, of course, there is between different brands or different organizations, but the principles of how you do it are pretty consistent. And that's why.
I see, Chris, you've got the FA and the NFL on there, so two big sporting entities. They're massive. Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely. And that's a great example of how they've identified that the need to train their people and be better at negotiating. And it's interesting, Mark made just a comment a minute ago. This can be trained. Negotiation skills, it is a skill, and it can be trained and it can be practiced. And if you do that, if you learn the theory, you get the basic grounding, and then you practice and keep. You will keep improving, and I think that's the principle that we follow, and certainly as part of our workshop program, and certainly as part of our consultancy work with some of these brands, that's what we focus on. So that just gives you a snapshot of who we are and what we work, the companies we work with. I've sort of got the plan for some next 20 minutes, half an hour is really to, instead of just getting into the detail of how we work through all of this, the preparation phases of negotiations and the process that we take, what we thought we'd do, we'd give you 6 top tips for negotiation. And just, if you take 1 or 2 of these away, hopefully take all 6 of these away, then hopefully that will help you in the negotiations that you get into in the future. And I'm going to just quickly run through each one of them and talk through them on why we think they're really important. So, having said that, I'm going to take two in one go here. These 2 top tips. The first one is be really clear what you want to achieve in the negotiation, and make sure you create a lower limit or a walkaway point, and always have an alternative. So in negotiations, and generally we always set out with an objective, and people will come across many times, I'm sure, SMART objectives, and they're great to start to try and understand what you want to get out of the negotiation and the results you want to get. But actually in negotiation, what we try and do is introduce different tiers and ranges within the objectives. So instead of having a yes or no objective, have I hit it or haven't I hit it, we try and create 3 different tiers: an optimal, a desired, and an essential position. And I've changed those photos for you, Tony. I thought you'd be I see you nodding at those.
So Ferguson's at the top.
Absolutely. So that's the absolute optimal that he could have achieved that year, winning 3.
Yeah.
That's the best possible result.
Fantastic.
A desired result, sitting in the middle, he's won the Premier League. That's a great result, a great outcome, and what he really wanted at the start of the season.
You'd take that all day long, wouldn't you?
And that's the same in a negotiation. If you can hit your desired position in a negotiation, fantastic.
And Chris, you've got 2 top football managers there, or head coaches, and then you've got an ice cream. What's going on with the ice cream?
So the ice cream is absolutely, that is the minimum you would accept and still be satisfied. If I said to my kids on a hot sunny day, do you want an ice cream? That's the minimum they'd accept. 1 ball of vanilla ice cream, no flake, no sprinkles. That's the base level.
I'm a flake man myself. Yeah.
So that's now, what I would normally ask at this point, and I'll ask this question to the group, not that you can answer it.
Well, they can stick an answer in the chat if they want to, Chris.
Let's see. What do we think is the most important of those 3, and why? So if you have a little think about that, which is the most important of those levels?
Yeah, so just
Well,
say
the first one,
yes,
essential.
optimal, desired, or essential in the chat, and we'll get a sort of consensus there, I think.
There's
I'm never going for a boring ice cream like that, though, Chris. I'm not.
There's a few essentials coming through there.
I think essentials have got it. There's nobody said optimal.
There's plenty of desireds.
There's a few desired.
Yeah. Look,
there's an optimal there. I'm not sure if that one was thrown in because nobody else had done it.
Yeah.
So we would say absolutely that the most important of those levels is the essential position, because that sets your walk away. And what we've got to make sure of is that we're really clear about what our essential position is before we go into a negotiation, and absolutely don't break that essential position, which is sometimes really difficult to get. And if there's pressure coming in, particularly in an industry like football, which is quite, it clearly gets huge amount of press, and there's the fans and the press are on the case. Oh, we need to do this. We need, and sometimes it can be, I'm sure, quite a pressurized environment. But what we absolutely need to be sure about is that we don't break those essential positions. We go into it really clear about how much we're prepared to pay, or how, the minimum we're prepared to accept for a player, and not break it. Because if we start breaking that, we start doing deals that we can't do, we can't afford, we didn't want to do, we weren't prepared to do at the beginning, and actually lose a lot of value. So be really clear about what your essential position is, and don't break it. Of course, going back to that tip, the second tip is always having an alternative. And that's really important because it helps you maintain your essential position. If you've got an alternative that you can move into, if you don't achieve your essential position, it gives you a lot more strength and power to hold that spot.
Yeah. So Chris, if you're an agent and you've got an option A club, you need to really try and get yourself an option B club as well, don't you? Or two very good options there, if you possibly can. And the same for on the other side of the coin, if you're trying to sign that star striker, if he's going to cost too much, what's your next position? What's your next? I don't mean position in football terms. I mean, who's your next star striker that you're going to, go to if that's proven to be expensive or doesn't happen at the right time?
I agree, Tony. If you've not got an alternative before you go into a negotiation, your first job is to get an alternative. Make sure you have an alternative, because if you can't hit your essential position, you move to your alternative. That's not a negative thing to do. That's not a negative position. It just helps you make sure that you don't do something that you really shouldn't be doing. Agree to something that you shouldn't be agreeing to. So make sure you've got an alternative. We call it a BATNA, a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Okay. So be really clear what that alternative is. And I've just noticed in the comments there, can you give us an example of an alternative? Absolutely. So let's be creative about how you identify what your alternatives are. If you're trying to sign a striker and you can't agree the fee with that other club, clearly the most obvious alternative is going to be another striker. So, striker B from another club. But actually, that might not be achievable. So what other alternatives might there be? You might be able to loan the striker from somewhere else.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Think, well, we need a striker, but only because Aldi's not scoring enough goals. We can't buy the striker. Let's buy a more creative player who's going to create more crosses and more chances for our existing people.
That's another good alternative.
Let's bring our guy who's on loan at somewhere else. Let's bring him back and get him to play. There are lots of other alternatives to just buying another one, but be really clear what those alternatives are. And I'll just pop that slide on as well, which is a really important one. And I've highlighted one of those points around the things to consider when you're creating your alternative, and that's have internal alignment. Be really clear that this is the plan that we're going to execute, should we not be able to achieve our essential position.
And Chris, when you say internal alignment, what do you mean? Is that so you're the sporting director and you've got buy-in from the people above you, or what?
Absolutely. So think about the stakeholders in this. So absolutely the owner needs to be on board. Absolutely the finance director, and absolutely, but the manager particularly.
Yeah.
Because what we don't want is at some point is the manager, being unhappy that we've not been able to achieve that, and we've not just kept throwing money at it.
Well, we saw that with Andre Villas-Boas at, I think it was Marseille, wasn't it? He had a bit of a big bust up because there was no internal alignment on. Was it a player coming in, or the player he sold and then the one that came in, or something like that?
I think it was something like that, wasn't it? But it just shows you how important that internal alignment is, and actually being really clear that this is the plan, this is what we're going to do, get everybody on board and behind that, and really importantly, make sure that everybody understands what their role and how they communicate that internal alignment as well, because you just don't want the manager in the press or in the next press conference or something saying something that that fundamentally impacts on the negotiation that you're trying to do.
I mean, Chris, I remember watching. I watched. I'm based up in Newcastle, so I was watching Sunderland Till I Die, and there's a really great moment there where the CEO it's the clock's ticking down on the transfer window. He wants the striker. He's only got one in his sights, and he ends up overpaying for the striker at the last minutes and hours of a transfer window. And everything you've just said there, it's the opposite of, isn't it? He's done the opposite of that, and he's ended up overpaying for what
absolutely
for what he wanted massively.
Getting that plan and being really clear about what the timings are around that plan is really critical. So often everything gets left to the last minute, and actually a lot of the time that's because there's no alternative. What is our alternative, and when do we action that alternative?
Chris, we might get, I don't know whether we've got enough time to get onto about the transfer window and how it puts a pressure on, doing your deals, doing your negotiation, because it's almost like somebody started a clock and you've got to get your deal done. And that must play itself into a real tough negotiation.
And that's a huge time is a huge factor in negotiations, and fundamentally changes where the balance of power sits in any kind of relationship. Who's got the most time, who really needs to get that deal done this transfer window, and actually that's why planning in advance and being really clear about your structure and your plan, and when you're going to start to action your alternative is really important, and making sure that the third point on there, understood by your counterpart, making sure that if you're trying to do a deal with somebody and they're holding out, not going to do a deal, I'm going to leave it later in the window because I'm going to drive the price up. Well, at some point you've got to make sure that your counterpart, the other club, understands we've got an alternative here. So if we're not able to do the deal at this price, and we've got an alternative available to us that we're really comfortable and we're all aligned behind, that we're just going to do that.
Yeah, we'll just forget that. We'll stop that, and then we'll move to Plan B, or even be Plan C in a transfer window.
And Chris, I think last summer the whole Jadon Sancho Dortmund illustrates loads of these points, because Dortmund didn't wait on the overall transfer window. They set their own time pressure and went August the 10th or something, wasn't it? And they stuck to that. They could see that clubs trying to buy Jadon Sancho didn't have alternatives. They were like, no, you really want him. And it was a number of these ones that you can see. And it was Man United didn't have a BATNA. There was no real and genuine actual. They were like, no, we're just not going to pay that much. You've got, if you get your bluff called with an alternative, then you're absolutely blown apart. Your alternative has to be real. You have to make sure the other person knows about it, and you need to keep using it for gentle pressure. An alternative keeps the negotiation moving and keeps it dynamic rather than getting to deadlock. So if you're at deadlock, price, If you're like, yeah, but I've got this alternative over here, then there's going to be some dynamism and there'll be some movement.
Great. Good point. Thank you, Mark.
Absolutely. So, listen, that was they were the first two tips.
Chris, could you go back? So we've had a question. Could you just go back to the 6 tips? I think somebody wanted to just double check on the 6 tips. So yeah, so we've gone through the first 2, and then we're going to talk about, is it the next 2 that we're going to talk about, or the next one?
So the next one is absolutely, we've kind of done that. Make sure that all the stakeholders are aligned and in agreement with the plan, and they understand what's going to happen.
Yeah, perfect.
If we can't hit that central position, if we don't hit our walkaway point, then we're going to go over here. We're going to do our plan B alternative.
Yeah, perfect.
And the timings of that and how that's going to play out. If everybody's on board with that and understands that, then you have a strong alignment and you have less chance of that whole thing falling apart.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
So that was number 3.
Yeah.
So the fourth tip is around variables. So have some flexibility around the variables, give and take variables to ensure you can negotiate and not concede. So what do I mean by variables? Well, variables are the currency of a negotiation. Like, they're the things that we trade when we're negotiating, and they go back and forth. And there are 2 types we talk about in variables. We talk about give variables and take variables. And, very simply, give variables are the stuff that you give, and take variables are stuff you take from your counterpart.
Yeah.
And
just hold it there a second, Chris. What we'll do is, if people can put in the chat, if you're on the club side of things, if you can put some of the variables down from potentially a transfer fee negotiation, a transfer deal, or a loan deal, is it just price? Is there other things involved? And alternatively, if you're an agent and you're talking about your players deal, what are the variables that you're going to be discussing? Just stick a few ideas in the chat, if you would, and as we go along, we'll talk about them.
Pieces.
Fantastic. Yes, that'd be great if we could. It gives us an idea. Now, the whole I guess the whole challenge around variables, and very often we see negotiations taking place with few variables. So if you're only negotiating with one thing, you're negotiating on price and that's it, then it makes a negotiation very, very difficult. The more variables that we can create, the more flexible and the more fluid the negotiation can be. And if you think about some of the things, if you're for example, if you're a selling club, what do you want to get from the other side? Clearly there's a transfer thing, but what other elements can we introduce into this negotiation? Equally, what are your give variables? So what are you going to give the other side? Now, clearly there's the registration, the player registration, but what else can we include in this negotiation that will perhaps help free up that negotiation and facilitate the trading of those variables? So we've got quite a few variables coming through in the chat. I guess a lot of that is around bonus payments, goals bonuses, accommodation and travel budget, maybe if they're foreign players, covering costs of things like housing and cars and treatment, and I guess intellectual, IP rights as well will be in there somewhere. I thought I saw that one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's quite a good list, actually. It's not a bad list. I mean, obviously, we're going to go through some of them here for people to see.
So those are just a few of the ones that we put down. I think our challenge always in negotiations before you go into a negotiation is identify all of the variables that you can and be really clear about which are the most important ones to you and which are the most important ones to the club or the counterpart or the, whoever you're negotiating with, because they're the ones that will become a key part of the negotiation going forward.
Yeah, I've got a question here, Chris, and it's probably something that we've omitted, and it's from Steve. And Steve says, what about agents negotiating with corporate entities, companies such as Adidas and Nike, for example? Does this fall somewhere else in the negotiation scale? Well, I think it's an integral part. I think we'll probably add it for the next seminar that we do. We're talking generally about clubs and agents and players, but absolutely, I would say. What do you think about that, Chris?
I completely agree. This is, absolutely sits alongside, these two sorts of negotiations. If you're trying to do a boot deal for your player, absolutely be clear about what you want to try and achieve out of it. Have an alternative. If Adidas are not going to come to the party and you can't get what you want from Adidas, we need to be having the conversations with Nike and Puma and, all the others as well at the same time, whoever else there may be. Other brands are available. And actually, be really clear about the variables that you're going to trade on, money and boots and free kit and all that kind of stuff. And going back the other way, how many appearances do I have to give? All of those sorts of things can start to feed into that negotiation, and those variables will fuel that discussion. So absolutely, commercial partnerships are part of this.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
So those are just a few of the variables that we came up with. I think our number one tip is, be really clear about what those variables are, and make sure that you have some give and some take variables that you can trade. What we're trying to do away with is trading on one variable, which is very often price. You start high and they start low, and both of you are conceding on that price until you get to a middle ground where you agree. That's not really a negotiation at all. You're both conceding the whole way through.
Yeah.
Negotiation is where you're starting to move things around. It's moving something in your favor every time and trading X for Y so that you can reach an agreement. Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Chris.
So that's variables, which kind of leads on to the next top tip, which is always get something for something, which I kind of alluded to there. If you're going to give away something, always make sure you move something back in your direction. So go back to that previous example. If you're starting on a transfer fee, let's say, and you offer, you want £10 million and they're paying you or offering 2, what you're not doing is coming up and meeting at 6 in the middle, because all that's doing is negotiating or haggling on one variable on price. Yeah. You're conceding down and they're conceding up. If we're going to reduce our request or our price from 10 to 9 or 10 to 8, we need to make sure we move something back in our direction. So every time you give something away, make sure you get something back in your direction, which is why having a range of variables will allow you to move something in your direction. So it might be, if we accept a slightly lower price, we will insist on all of that being paid up front rather than staggered over 2 seasons, as an example.
Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, we could talk about the sell-ons or the add-ons and other things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll reduce our price from 10 million to 8 million, but we want, 15% sell-on fee rather than 10 for doing it.
Or the other way around. Yeah. That's, fantastic.
Yeah. So always, and that's a key part of negotiation. The way I get people to visualize it is the graphic equalizer on your stacking system. Or
you're showing your age, Chris. You're showing your age.
Yeah, no, absolutely am. Absolutely. but the mixing desk on a music mixing
in the
desk.
club that we've never been to for a year, and mine's probably 10 years I've never been to a club, but yeah, the mixing desk, yeah, good one.
But what you're doing is moving those things up and down,
yeah,
to try and get the sound right. It's the same with negotiation. You're moving the variables up and down till you hit a happy balance where both sides are satisfied.
Great. Okay.
So always get something for something. And the final one, number 6, is a really straightforward one. Practice your negotiation ahead of the negotiation proper. We work in an industry here where actually the guys on the pitch spend all week practicing.
Yeah.
Ronaldo practices his free kicks every day to get better at doing his free kicks so that when he goes onto the pitch, he's got a stronger chance of getting the right result. And negotiation's no different. It's a skill that can be practiced and learned. So don't practice your negotiation in front of your counterpart. Practice ahead of time, because all that will do, it will show you where you're not prepared, where you've got things wrong. It will help you practice deliver the negotiation and the offer and the offer in the right way possible, and actually will absolutely give you a greater chance of success. So practice ahead of your negotiation.
No, that's great. Thanks, Chris.
So that are just 6 tips for better negotiation.
Yeah, and I've got a question here, and it's from it's coming on an email to me, and it says, what about the first, if you sat on a negotiation and you're talking about wages, salary, what about mentioning the figure first that you want? Is there something that you can give advice on about that, or what do you think of that, Chris?
It used to make me smile in the sponsorship world, particularly. There used to be this adage going around that the first side to quote a number always lose.
Yeah.
So you'd end up in these meetings where you're trying to discuss a sponsorship deal and nobody dares say this is how much it costs.
Yeah,
because the first person to do that is just.
I've been in them rooms where nobody wants to say a figure at all.
and I would say that's absolutely the wrong way to do it. And actually the research, you probably remember better than me, Mark, but the research suggests that the side that presents their numbers first very often gets the best deal.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
They've set the playing field by going first. Because if you go, this is how much money I want, people tend to get fixated on that number and try and negotiate from that number rather than resetting it and going with the number that they wanted to start with. So it's a concept called anchoring. If you are confident that you know enough and you've prepared well enough, you should always go first if you can, rather than if you're responding, you're always reacting. You never want to react in a negotiation. You talk about your own numbers the whole time. You acknowledge the other person's. You never talk about the other person's numbers. It's all about yours.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Should we talk about the course, Chris? The course that's coming up in March.
Yeah. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of some of the things that we talk about. But what we've done with Tony is create this total football negotiation workshop that runs over 2 Thursdays in March. So it's 6 hours in total. And actually what we'll do as part of that is sort of take you through some of our key topic areas around how we go about training and consulting for people, and how we guide them through preparing for negotiations, how we set our objectives and plan our alternatives, how we deal with objections, and how we use language and be really careful and listen out for signaling or loose language that can help us, how we, interpret or look at the balance of power within a negotiation, how we trade conditionally, and how we manage alignment, particularly in your organization, to get the right deal. So it will give you, over those 6 hours, it will give you a really strong framework to follow, a really strong process to go through to prepare and execute brilliant negotiations.
Fantastic, Chris. And what I've done is I've shared, everyone who's come on to the webinar tonight will get an Eventbrite notification about the course. It's a month from today. It's exactly a month from today. Yeah. So we'll be back here delivering. And if you've enjoyed tonight, and one of the things that I really like about working with these guys is they really just get, they get football, they know football, we talk about football, it's all relatable to football, it's bespoke for the football community, and that's what we're trying to achieve and we're trying to roll out. So hopefully you can come and join us on that course in a month's time. As I say, it's out now on Eventbrite. I sound like an ad, don't I? It's out now on Eventbrite, it's like, but hopefully, it'll be a very small group. We've got really limited numbers. I know there's been a massive number on here tonight. We've had over 100 people on this webinar, but we'll be dealing with quite a small group. So if you're a sporting director, an agent, a head of recruitment, if you're in the football industry and you're dealing with, you feel like you need some help and support, and I certainly do, in terms of negotiation, and you feel like I do that it's not your strong suit, then this is absolutely for you. So we'll hope to see some of you on that course. Final words from you, Chris? Anything, do you think?
No, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you so many of you for coming on tonight. It's a really interesting topic, and I think it'd be interesting to get a handle on whether people think that they negotiate more than they actually do now, and having had those just 6 tips, hopefully that's given you something to go away with and think about next time you get into that negotiation.
Absolutely, Chris. And we've just had a last minute question, and I'm going to put this to you, Mark, before you sort of wrap it up for us as well. And it's from Raphael in Peru, of all places, Peru, which is fantastic. I've never been, but living in Newcastle, there was a good player from Peru who played. Does anyone want to put the name in the chat? And Raphael asks, Nobby Solano, there we go. Well done. He asks, what are the key suggestions about how to negotiate? And it's going to have to be a quick answer, to negotiate with difficult people, Mark.
It's a question we get asked a lot, because what you have to do in really, really short answer is really understand why they are being difficult. There will be a reason why.
Yeah.
It may be an act, it may be a tactic, or you're not understanding them, so hence we think they're being difficult. And one of the key things with negotiation is communication. Communication is your own responsibility. I hear too often, I told him, but he didn't get it. I don't care. Yeah. Communication is your responsibility, so you need to make sure the other side really understand what you're trying to communicate, and that creates 80 to 90% of the issues and why people think the other person's being difficult, because we're not communicating properly. For a very advanced race of kind of beings, we're not very good at this stuff, and virtual doesn't always help that. So I would, my one, if I was allowed one tip, try and really understand what are they trying to achieve and why are they finding it hard to achieve it with you. Hopefully that helps, Raphael. And by the way, love Peru. I've been there about 4 or 5 times.
Oh, right, fantastic. No, really good answer. They might have been just having a bad day, Mark. It might have just been everything's gone wrong on the day and they turn up for the negotiation and they're not in the best of moods, and you just got to try and help them through that. We're getting some really positive feedback in the chat, and I've just shared the link for the course this time next month. I'm massively looking forward to it. I think, you know, I'm really excited. You've seen a little glimpse of what sort of information, what knowledge the guys can help you with. And I just think, you know, it's been terrific tonight. I'm so pleased with it. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Mark. So listen, we'll go back to our daily routine, have a think about negotiation, maybe have a practice. You know, Chris talked about practicing. Maybe start, you know, negotiating and start thinking about negotiation. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff out there about negotiation, but let's see. We hope to see some of you on our Total Football negotiation. Thank you and good night. Cheers, fellas. Cheers, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.